Welcome back. We are now going to look at the process by which the machine builds the classification tree. Remember, this is machine learning. So what we're really going to do is to present the machine with our training data. And by looking at the data, the machine, namely the computer program, is going to figure out what is the best classification tree for this context. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So we'll look at it in two parts. First, what we'll do is we'll review how classification trees work. In other words, assuming that we have a classification tree, how does the machine use that classification tree to actually apply the rules to a particular case? And then we'll go on to look at the steps involved in how the machine actually builds the classification tree. Okay, so let's move on and look at first how a classification tree is actually used. First, let's take a look at a classification tree. So that's a classification tree. Okay, now this is a tree that we did not build. The computer built it, the machine built it based on some data that we presented to it. So we said, here is my historical data. From the historical data, this is what we told the computer. We said, please figure out a good classification tree that identifies the patterns in my historical data. That's all we did. After that, the machine went ahead, looked at the data, did all sorts of things, and then said, hey, this is your best classification tree. Okay, so we will first understand or review how this classification, once the tree is built, how do we use it for classification? And then we'll go on to look at some principles using which the computer actually figured out that this is the best classification tree. Okay, now before that, let's set the context. The context is that let's say we've got a bank, and this bank has many loan applicants, and it's got, of course, information about them. It's got information about their age, income, education level, how many credit lines they already have, family size, etc., etc. So we've got a lot of information, and historically we've got information on whether for each person for whom we have all this data, whether their loan application was accepted or rejected. This is historical information. So now what we are trying to do is to say, well, we've got this historical information. I want to now automate this decision, right? Those historical decisions were made by human beings. People looked at the data and they came to the conclusions, and we are happy with it, and we want the computer to say, okay, you figure out what patterns are in this, give me those patterns in the form of a tree, and then we'll just use this tree in future instead of using human beings to make this decision. Okay, so that's really what where we are at now. So let's assume that the computer went ahead, looked at the data, and figured out that this is the best classification tree. We will later on look at the steps by which the computer actually came to this. Okay, so what happens is the tree is now given to us. Now let's say along comes a new person who's an applicant, for whom we are going to use the tree to make a decision on whether to give them the loan or not. Okay, so we've got all their demographic information. So first what we are going to do is we're going to say, okay, is this person's income less than or equal to 100,000? Okay, it's, of course, the answer is yes or no. Let's say the answer is yes. So then it goes on this side. And then we ask the next question, is their education level less than or equal to 1? Okay, and let's say the answer is no. So because the answer is no, we come on this side. Then we ask the question, do they have less than or equal to 3 credit lines? By credit lines we mean credit cards and other kinds of ways by which they're obtaining credit. Okay, we say yes. So let's say that is also a yes. So then we come here, and then the tree is telling us accept this application. In other words, give them the loan. Okay, that's how the tree is used to make a decision. On the other hand, let's consider a different case. Suppose a person comes along whose income is greater than 100,000. So they now come this side. Then we ask a question, is their family size less than or equal to 5? Suppose the answer again is no, then we come here, and then it says, accept, give them the loan. Okay. Now don't look at the logic of whether this tree makes sense or not. This is just a tree I made up for illustration. It may not make too much sense if you looked at it really logically. But that's how you use a tree. Okay. So the next thing we'll do is to go ahead and start learning the steps by which the computer actually constructed this tree. Or in other words, how the machine learned the underlying patterns in the data.